Welcome to today's keynote panel, Building a Better World Connected Through Esports. Today marks World Esports Day, a day founded by the British Esports Association, of whom one of our panelists today is part of, in order to celebrate global awareness of esports and recognize the successes of individuals and members of the gaming community. This includes streamers, gamers, competitive players, and everything in between. So who better to speak to than this esteemed panel and pioneers of the Global Esports Federation, representing 3 different continents around the globe. They're all in 3 different, very different time zones right now. The GEF was brought to life with a mission to create sustainable development of esports communities around the world through providing resources, education, and support everywhere. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our 3 panelists. We have Chester King, the CEO of the British Esports Association. We have Chong, the president of the Singapore Esports Association, and Dr. Melita N. Moore, MD, the vice president of the Pan Am Esports Development Federation. Now, you guys do so much, actually, and I know this one title doesn't sufficiently cover all the things that you've accomplished. But to start off, why don't you tell us, from each of you, why or how did you get into the esports industry, and perhaps what your relationship to esports or video games is?
So, I'm 50 years old and I've got a son who's 21, and I kind of tracked his journey in sports and esports in the UK. And it was about 6 years ago that I realized that there just wasn't enough being done as a collective in our country. And also, I was a bit upset there weren't enough British global, esports champions. So I've got a strong background in sports. My uncle ran into Olympics for the UK, and I'm a member of Wimbledon, and I've worked in football. And I just felt that we could do a better job, supporting the esports system, not trying to govern it, but just really trying to help set structure. So in 2015, I went to the British government to say that I'd like to set up a national body, and under our law, you have to have permission from the government to use the word British in your title as a company or a country or an organization. So it took me about 6 months of going to number 10 Downing Street, of presenting what is esports and how we can create a national body. And then they awarded me and a group of people authority to establish it as a not-for-profit organization. That's how we started in kind of 2015. And then in January 2016, I had the piece of paper to register the British Esports Association. So we don't have federations in our country, we have associations. So that got going. And then during that journey, and in fact, actually the medals behind me was in 2016, I went to the Rio Olympics with the British government, and we did a 2-day esports event called the E-Games. We were just a bit early on that. People hadn't quite got it in their head. I know we'll probably talk about later about, is it a sport? Isn't it a sport? Is an activity? But what I saw firsthand through my son is what an incredibly inclusive activity it was, of everything that I could see, and I loved so many aspects of that. So, as well as being involved in that, I was very honored to be invited by the IOC, the Olympics, to join their esports and gaming liaison group in 2019. And then obviously I joined the Global Esports Federation as well. And then those roles are kind of volunteer roles, as well as I work with the British government on esports education. And then commercially in esports, I'm a small co-owner of the London Royal Ravens, which is the Call of Duty franchise for the UK. And then a team called Resolve Esports, which is a League of Legends team, NLC. And we've just signed with Williams Formula One to create a Rocket League team to enter the European Rocket League tournament. So I have a really kind of a philanthropic view about esports as a great activity. And then there's a commercial side as well. So kind of right in the coalface, but very focused in the UK.
Wow, that is quite a lot that you're doing over there in the UK. How about you, Dr. Melita, over there in the US? You've had an interesting journey, I think, into esports from traditional sports as well. Why don't you tell us about how you got into this?
I have, and I wish my story was as cool as Chester's, and great things that he's doing there in the UK. Yes, I've been in esports for, I say, a short time, just since 2019. And my entree into esports is a little different than Chester and Chong. I'm a sports medicine physician, so I've been in traditional sports for over a decade, taking care of professional athletes in the United States. And in 2019, with our NBA and our WNBA team, I was asked to take care of our NBA 2K team, which is professional esports team. And I had no idea what esports was in 2019, and I didn't know why these professional gamers needed a physician, but I learned very quickly that a lot of people didn't know why they needed a physician. And so over the past 2 years, just really have kept my foot on the gas in the health and wellness space, and really being able to help to create some protocols, and really starting to do a lot of research in the health space for gamers and for professional esports athletes. And then, of course, transitioning over and being invited to join this very prestigious Global Esports Federation. In my time there, a member of the board, and more recently, as you mentioned, being appointed as the vice president for our Pan America Esports Development Federation. So I'm playing a few different hats in the esports space, and I'm just really excited about it. It's certainly in 2 years. What I started to do in 2019 and what I'm doing in 2021 is totally different. And I think that's the beauty of esports; just allows you to have this growth and really just be present and be able to kind of move in different areas and different sectors, and it all still comes together at the center of esports. So I love it.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that's actually a topic we're definitely going to go into a little bit later. I think some insight into the healthcare for esports athletes. I think this is just a really interesting topic, and often a topic of debate. And last but not least, Chong over there in Singapore, who will be hosting the very first GEG Global Esports Games by the Global Esports Federation. Why don't you tell us how you got into this industry, and maybe your relationship to esports or video games?
My introduction to gaming and esports actually started so many years ago when I was a teenager. My formal participation in esports only started relatively late, where I was crossing over from the education technology sector into esports. And at the time, or rather into technology itself, related to gaming, AR, XR, augmented reality, extended reality, related types of businesses. At that point, the SEA Games was coming up in 2019, and it was necessary to form a federation for the purpose of participating in the SEA Games, so that we could choose or select athletes to participate in that event. So together with other luminaries, people who have been in this industry far longer than I, we started the Singapore Esports Association, so that we could create and work with the existing government organizations to grow and develop esports in a more formal way. Because as much as Singapore has grown and progressed so fast, we've also started to lose some of our community and social spaces for gaming and esports. In the past, we would used to say in school, we used to say, I'll see you at the LAN shop, or let's go to the LAN shop to hang out. But usually now, people just say, I'll see you online later. And this big change has actually affected our esports competitors and gamers quite a bit. And I would say that one of the things which we really hope to do is to recreate the sense of community and reinvigorate the esports community, and also grow new and more players who in this area, so that we would be able to compete on a global level professionally. Because we certainly do have that capability, as we can see from some very successful Singapore athletes. And I think that with societal and government support, we would be able to help give them the shoulders to stand on to reach for the sky. Yeah, so that was how I started to get involved, and how I started to and the reasons behind the involvement for the Singapore Esports Association.
You mentioned your journey into the space actually began as a teenager with games. So just a quick fire question for each of you. What I guess your favorite game, or most impactful game that really impacted your life in some way, whether you played it or you're watching it. What's your game of the moment that just means something to you?
I would say that the category of games or esports which really drew me in, unfortunately, it's not so popular now. It's actually the real-time strategy, and to me the height, or rather the thing which I love so much in school, was actually StarCraft. Yeah, uh, and yeah, that was a game which had so much impact because it was something which was fun to me and something I was actually good at. But oh well. Tastes do change over time. So I guess if you were to ask about what I like now, it's more of storytelling games or grand strategy games as a replacement to start my poor lamented StarCraft.
I'm totally with you on that, by the way. I hope maybe GEF can bring RTS back in general. Yeah, how about you guys, Chester and Melita? Is there a game that's
Yeah.
really stood out?
Yeah, I think depending on the ages of who you talk to, there's video games like GoldenEye, which was a massive game, which was a James Bond film, and for my wife who's mid-30s, I think they made twice as much money off the video game GoldenEye than the movie. And what for my son, when Black Ops 3 came out, Call of Duty, it was the biggest media release of all time. It did 500 million sales so bigger than all the movies at that point. So in the UK, Call of Duty obviously is a massive game, FIFA, but Rocket League for me is one of the best. It's our poster child esport because one, you're not killing anyone, but you understand the concept of football and cars, and a lot of brands, including sports brands like Premier League football teams and Formula One teams, are getting into Rocket League, and I think it's a great crossover esport. So for me, any of those three are really exciting. Show my age, Donkey Kong as a child was a popular game, but but Black Ops 3 was a very significant media moment. It's a bit like when I watched Star Wars in the cinema for my son. It's when Black Ops 3 came out. That was for us in the UK anyway.
There's nothing wrong with Donkey Kong at all. I grew up on Donkey Kong too, so that's perfectly fine. For me, NBA 2K will always be my favorite game, and it's really because that's what got me into this industry. But it's in its infancy, and so within kind of all of the esports titles, NBA 2K League has only been around for 4 years, and so it is certainly. I think it is a very good title when we're bringing people who may not know a lot about esports or about gaming, and it's a way to kind of bring in a traditional sport and bring it over to the electronic side. I think it's palatable. But for me, my team when I was their doctor, they won the championship in 2020 for the NBA 2K League, and so for me, it will always be my favorite game.
What I think is really interesting is that, and this is what makes esports and gaming so special. The three of you alone have named three very different titles, three totally different genres. And I think this is what esports is all about, but also what it makes it a bit complicated sometimes. So with that, let's go to where we're at today. And, Chester, I heard, World Esports Day was actually thanks to you and your team for officiating it. So that's a big milestone for esports recognition. And so what would you say is the biggest evolution of esports over the last 10 years worth celebrating? What are we celebrating today?
Yeah, so I mean, the last 2 years in particular, the pandemic, for some people have been, obviously it's been terrible for a lot of people. I think what's been interesting about the positioning of esports and the acceptability of esports, we run a national schools tournament, and we were the only activity that happened after school throughout the last 2 years. And Chong was saying about how people have been online, but in a way, it's helped a lot of people to stay social and stay competitive. And what we've seen in the UK is a lot of sports bodies come to us and say, look, how can we help? And especially like British basketball, we did some NBA 2K tournaments. So I think the evolution of technology is helped with esports and what's been going on the last 10 years and the acceptability. And I'm sure we're going to talk about, is it a sport? And I mentioned that again. So the other thing that we've done also is we've created an educational qualification at high school. So in the UK, we've got over 2,000 people now, children or under 18, studying esports as a subject. So I think over the last 10 years, it's a great inclusive activity. It's, what I am quoted as saying is you've got social media, which, can be good and bad. You've got passive media, which can be good and bad. And I equate esports as an active media because I think, to improve your memory function, I know we might talk about dementia studies as well going on. So I think for me, it's a fun activity. It's become more professional. It's become more accepted as mainstream. And I love, to me, when people talk about, are you work in video games? And I go, no, I work in esports. And people go, what do you mean? I said, I only focus on the human versus human interaction, the human versus human competition. And I love the term esports. I think some people get a bit upset about it, it's not a sport. Again, keep going back to that. But I think over the last 10 years, or for me, the last 6 years, I've seen this acceptance, and also most professional sports people in their spare time do play video games with esports. So it's not like it's a hidden thing and only a certain type of person does it. I think it's incredibly inclusive. And what we've seen with our drive in women in esports, in particular in the UK, we've got a committee of 11 women. We're promoting women-only tournaments. We're really trying to get the diversity balance better. It's really exciting for us about the opportunities, and everyone talks about, esports and what's going to go on. To me, we are at the beginning of a lot of things, because even though we've been in the industry, a lot of people are now just trying to understand how can they value esports and what they can do. So I think the 10 years has been like that, and I still think we're going to keep going like that. And with the Asia Games, and I'm really happy about the World Esports Day, because other great things, have these, a national celebration, and this is what it is. There's not a commercial angle to it. It's just to celebrate whoever you are at a school, a college, a university, or or a 60-year-old or a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old just having fun playing esports is a fully inclusive activity.
I would like to push this one step further. I feel that in the future, we're going to think of esports as its own term. Because, if we compare sports and esports, there are some similarities, but at the end of the day, the esports itself is its own term, its own ecosystem, its own people, and its own media. And I really like where Chester has gone with this, about the social aspect and human versus human interactivity, and in that sense, it is the new way for the younger generation, and perhaps even my generation, to interact with friends and and others from all and so many different disparate walks of life. Because very often, all you see is the other character in front of you. You do not know who exactly he is, where he came from, but it is someone you're competing against or you're competing with. And that is, to me, one of the greatest beauties of esports.
Well said. I mean, GEF does stand for inclusivity. What are the types of people who would you like to see more in this space in esports?
I'll jump in here, and Chester has already spoken about that, but within esports, there's some disparity for sure when we are looking at gender. So certainly, women in gaming is a very big passion point for me. It's a big initiative for Global Esports Federation, and what we are starting to see in the industry are more women, whether that's at the C-suite level, whether that's behind the camera, being a game developer, or actually truly being a professional esports athlete. And I know that this is it gets to be a controversial topic at times in the esports space, about having all female teams versus all male teams, or all women teams versus all men teams. And so I'm kind of on the fence about that, because what we know is that the majority of professional esports athletes are men. And we kind of look at other leagues throughout in the traditional sports space where we have kind of segregated by gender. And the parallels, and where there's just a huge disparity between the men's and women's leagues. And so women in gaming for me is a passion point. I certainly am promoting all women leagues, but I hope that we are doing that to be able to give women a safe space to play, to have their skills be put out on the mainstream and actually start to get through this pipeline like some of the male players have had the opportunity to do. But what I hope that we get to is where these are mixed gender teams, and we don't have to have an all female or all male league, and we can move toward where mixed gender is just what is traditional now in esport versus typically an all male team. So that is who I would like to see more of in the industry, and also certainly people of color. We know that there's also a big disparity with that across the world, and so we are hopefully moving toward that, especially at the Global Esports Federation. We like to say this word, radical inclusivity, and that's certainly what we are attempting to do. And I think we've been able to show that, and we're starting to see some of those changes within the industry. So I am certainly looking forward to where, 10 years from now, like Chester was saying, we're going here, and that we're no longer having these conversations about getting more women in the room on the stages or getting more people of color, because it's just a natural occurrence.
And I would add also, just what we've been doing in the UK, we've been doing a lot of pilots where we've been using different demographic of people to engage them in esports. So we've actually set up a tournament in schools for children who are disabled, and we've worked with our National Health Service for people who had spinal injuries, and we're actually working with our police to contact vulnerable children as well, and using esports as an activity to kind of break down barriers. And I think the interesting thing about women only tournaments is there was about 4 years ago, there was a group in Germany called Skylar, and they were the first people to go out and create an all-female league in CSGO. And everyone criticized them and said, well, why aren't men being involved? And they said, no, we're trying to create a safer environment to get the women's experience better, to re-engage them, exactly as Melita was saying. And at the time, there was a bit of kind of caution about it. But then the stuff that we're seeing when we go into secondary schools or in the UK is that when children try and qualify to represent their school, the boys are just a bit more experienced because they've been playing for more time. So what we're trying to do is actually go down to the elementary level and introduce certain esports. Because if you think in the UK anyway, an elementary school, I've got a 4-year-old daughter. She plays sport with boys. She's in a classroom with boys. But when you go to secondary school, they create this segregation, right? Esports has got a great opportunity to improve communication, to get rid of this toxicity. Because actually, if you're still competing or doing an activity as boys and girls through that middle age of puberty and teenageness, then that I think will help. I'm not trying to say esports is a solution for everything, but I think by actually this segregation that you have in sport, I think it does cause a communication problem. So I'm really hoping that we can encourage certain games in esports. Minecraft is a great game for younger. As I say, Rocket League's good, and continue this so there's a consistent relationship between the sexes, so there isn't this toxicity, but also that more women have an opportunity to represent their school.
Yeah, well said by all of you. I think that's again the beauty of it, where it kind of evens the playing field for no matter who you are, and seeing that trend of women, girls, even just becoming normalized for them to be in the gaming space. And I think this is just the beginning, and I can only see it getting better from here. So speaking of inclusivity, including esports into the realm of sports, the recent inclusion of esports in the 19th Asian Games in Hangzhou, which Chester mentioned briefly for 2022. So Dr. Moore, obviously you have an incredible background in sports medicine, and you're one of the few head physicians of professional esports in existence. So now, having seen both sides, I would love to hear your opinion on what does this mean to have esports included in the Asian Games, and also, are esports professionals considered athletes?
Ooh, that's such a hot topic, and my answer is going to be absolutely yes. I'll get to about. Let's talk about the Asian Games. I think that that's going to do a lot for esports, and we keep saying, kind of in the industry, well, esports is so new. I mean, really, it isn't. It certainly has been around since the 90s, at least organized esports. And when you look at the history supposedly of esports and the very first video game tournament, that was in the 1970s, and here in the US at Stanford University. So if you compare esports to traditional sports in the Olympics, I mean, I think the first original Olympics was like over 3,000 years ago. Then modern day was like in the late 1800s. So there's a bit of a gap and a time difference between traditional sport and esports. But to see that in the Asian Games, I just certainly think it puts our stamp, and it puts esports stamp to say that we're here as a sport, to be recognized as a sport. We know we saw that in the Tokyo Olympics, just with the demonstration with our virtual esports, and we certainly are going to be talking about active esports and virtual esports. That also was a very big step. As Chester was saying, he's helping to advise the IOC just about esports. So I certainly see it coming, and I think Asian Games is great that we're going to actually be able to see that in 2022. As a professional gamer, an athlete, the answer is absolutely yes. And the reason why I say that is because this narrative, when people are seeing gamers, and yes, it's a sedentary sport, but with some of the research that is out there, what we are seeing with, like, when you're looking at traditional athlete and how their heart rate goes up when they're playing, and their blood pressure goes up or their breathing goes up, we're seeing those same exact things with the same, like your heart rate is going up as in the same intensity in a professional gamer when they are in competition, or sometimes when they are in the high level practice. And so they are training just like a traditional athlete. I think they train a bit too much, but that's that's another topic. But they train, they do strategy, they have coaches, they have medical staff, and so they have a grueling travel schedule pre-COVID. And so when you look at what a traditional esport athlete goes through on a day-to-day basis from a practice and game perspective, and you compare that to a traditional sport, there really isn't any different. And so they certainly are athletes. When I take care of them, I treat them exactly the way I take care of my professional traditional sports and athletes. And so they are here. And the term e-athlete, esports athlete, it's whatever you want to put on it, whatever label, but I certainly will label them as an athlete for sure.
Fantastic. Do you gentlemen agree?
I do agree. For all intents and purposes, other than some of the physical aspects, esports is already requiring that amount of intensity and that amount of capability, strategic decision making, team play, and all of this related things which make sports great. In the same way, esports has those requirements. And what I would also go further to say is that if you see people who are claiming to play for like 10, 12 hours, that's not really the same as the routine of an esports athlete. An esports athlete requires a much more disciplined approach towards training and also towards coordination. They do the same things. They do after action reviews of how well did they do in the previous game. What are things they need to shake up? They need to study and the latest rules and the changes to the games, because with every different version of the game, there is something that they have to change. They have to tweak a strategy. If a new character coming out, how do I deal with this character if I meet them in a professional competition? And also not just that, as they shift from game to game, even though they seem to be similar, like for example, it's just an FPS game, the meta, or actually the thing which allows you to be successful in a particular game, changes. And are they able to shift to that? Are they able to train to those new standards? Those are always things which are challenging for esports athletes. And so in that sense, we do need to give them that respect.
Yeah, so from my point of view, I think if you're a professional gamer, then you are an athlete. And I think what I love about of what we see in the UK is the pro gamers are advocating to be physically fit and mentally fit. Get good sleep, eat well, train well. And what I like is that their messaging, albeit some parents might not like it, is actually do exercise and you'll become a better gamer. On one level, we're getting kids to games to do exercise. That's good, but some parents might have a bit of an issue with that. But I think what is good is they are advocating a good, healthy, balanced lifestyle if you can obviously try and achieve that. And just talking about the sport thing, so under UK law, if you are a sport, you get public funding. So under UK law, chess and bridge are not a sport, they're a game. So esports is a game, which we're happy with on one level at the amateur level, because what we didn't want when we went into schools is for the kids to say to the teachers, hey, I don't need to play football today because I've been playing esports for 2 hours. That would be the wrong message. But I think at a professional level, 100% they are athletes, and 100% it is a sport or perceived as a sport at that level. But there is a difference between doing it as an amateur or doing it as a professional, and I think we're very clear about that. But in countries like Poland, chess and bridge, they are a sport, so esports is a sport. So there is a bit of a mix, and I know we use the word active media, but when we started out, we didn't want to argue with the British government about taking public money to go towards physical activity and put it into gaming. That would have been wrong for us. So we've managed to navigate our way through the system, and the government really understand the values of esports, but they're just getting to terms now about the difference between professional esports player. In the UK, we're still probably a couple of hundred, whereas we've got 4 million people playing esports every day. There's probably about a couple of hundred that are making a living out of it. So it'll happen, but I agree 100% they should be athletes or recognized as athletes.
Speaking of these athletes, we are hosting our very first GEF Global Esports Games in Singapore this December. And I believe, the tour's already begun in LA recently, and it's moving into Riyadh tomorrow. And and then Singapore next in December. So Chong, tell us what this means for, Asia, the Asia community, and, for the professionals in this community.
So the Global Esports Games is, unlike the tours also, one of the significant first times where we are running this as a federation, where you are able to represent your country in order to win a medal in the same way which you could win a medal for your country in sports. And on this level, what we have been trying to do, or we've been working very hard to do, and with many thanks to our national federations, is to have this on a global level across all the different continents and across the different regions, across the different languages and races, and those type of things. Other than that, it is also the first time where we are actually doing this with women-only tournaments, because relevant to the things which my two colleagues here have mentioned, we do think that women-only tournaments, while they may not be our end goal, they are an important stepping point in regularizing getting more women into esports as a way. So we would like to increase that participation. And so those are two important things which we're doing. Other than the competition layer, there are two other layers. The first is the festival, which is more targeted at the grassroots, at gamers who just want to play, who are interested in playing games. And what we're trying to do is to get the grassroots to be able to play against each other across different continents in ways which would allow them to do so, and also to make new connections and friendships. And finally, we have the convention, where we hope to have serious discussions such as the one we're having today, which go very in-depth into the various things and pitfalls and also opportunities that esports and gaming has for the world. And what we hope for is for our brands and also event organizations, gamers, and people who are outside esports to listen in and to watch in to these things, so that they're able to get a better understanding of the ecosystems. Because I think one of the biggest challenges that in esports that we face now is that people are still hesitant because of a lack of knowledge of what is actually happening and where it actually is a great help. And also on the flip side of it, what we are hoping to do with the convention and the festival is to engage on a larger scale the different communities and to show how esports is and can be used as a force for good.
I know. So you guys have been observing the gaming industry, esports industry for a long time, and with that, the evolution of certain games becoming popular, certain games entering the esports space that, I would never, if you told me 7 years ago, mobile games was going to be at the forefront, in terms of numbers of players who engage in mobile games, I wouldn't have believed you. So I want to know maybe your opinion, your predictions, perhaps. Who do you feel is an up and coming, maybe country in esports development, or even type of esport?
Yeah, so I mean, what's if you look at different continents and countries, for me, India is going to become a big player. We actually had a call this week with the Indian government. They're going to be setting up some more formal federations in the different states. They've got 1.4 billion people. Most of them are cricket fans, obviously, because of the IPL. But I think they have traditionally, just because of just the class system there, mobile gaming is a big thing. PUBG and Call of Duty Mobile. So I think for me, India, will be improving on their esports capability. And I think one thing that's fantastic about the Global Esports Games is creating heroes. And what we don't have in the UK and what we don't have globally in esports is, hopefully you've all heard of Faker. He's one of the ultimate esports players, but there are not enough people like that. And if you watch, sport, for us in England, we just had Emma winning the US Open tennis. The government have just put in £20 million into tennis. There's going to be, my 4-year-old daughter wants to play tennis. We need heroes, right? And I think for me, there'll be countries, there's certain players like Faker, in his title. We've had a few guys in our side, but we need these tournaments to showcase talent and to showcase national heroes. And I still think, with me, with my flag here, I'm very proud to be British. I love, watching us compete in football and rugby and, the Olympics. And so for me, without these great tournaments or this new great tournaments of the Global Esports Games, which was, I'm really, really excited about, without that, I think, what is esports about? We want to kind of create this elite and pinnacle thing, and we want people to inspire them. So, I'm very excited about that. And I think what will happen is, as you can see, there are countries that are more mobile game focused, and there probably will be mobile game entries in future Global Esports Games. I know we're in Istanbul next year, and we're in Riyadh the following year. We've got a roadmap of 7 years of great games plus the title. So I think India, to me, will be very dominant in the mobile gaming setup, because they are now setting up the infrastructure with the government. And then there's brands like Jio, which is their telecom network. They've got 425 million subscribers of one telephone system. That England's only got 80 million people. They've got 420 million people on just one network. So bonkers, right? So I think it's going to be really good, and I think you're then going to see to me, I find it quite amusing that you've got the people who use the term traditional esports, like people using a PC or a console going, what is this mobile gaming? This is, you're getting, so it's quite funny that you're getting that term in the UK of traditional esports. But we've only been around, I know we've been around a long time. So I think it's exciting. And again, it just improves accessibility. The challenge that we've got is that mobile phones and devices aren't allowed in schools. So we've just got to position that and the narrative of that and the screen time. But it will be something that will evolve. And I think it'll be interesting. I think there's 8 titles been chosen in the Asian Games in Hangzhou. I don't know, and I should know this. Are they all PC and console, or are they or any mobile? I don't know, but
they are mostly mobile games.
Yeah.
Right. So there you go. It's happening already.
I think it's very interesting, Chester. We're just talking about mobile gaming, and whether it's at the esports, the competitive level, or just in the gaming community. Here in the U.S., there was a statistic that there's 50 million Americans over the age of 55 that use that mobile game for more than 4 hours a day. And so now we're looking at kind of this, older generation, a baby boomer kind of generation, which I think is just truly fascinating. Now, will they be, what the Global Esports Games? I don't know. But, I just really think that is powerful. And when we're talking about developing countries like, in Africa or continents in Africa, developing continents, Africa and certain countries, mobile gaming is really what they have. And so, we just did an event in Ghana, and most of the players, they use their mobile phone because, there's towers that they can use. And so I think mobile gaming is certainly going to take an uptick. But when we're talking about developing areas, we have just recently created our development federation for Africa as well as for Pan Americas. And so with the Global Esports Federation. And so we're really looking forward to seeing how we can help move esports forward in these areas. But I think that we are going to keep a really close eye. Africa is coming up strong in the esports space for sure. And we know that Pan Americas, Mexico is kind of the cradle of that for Latin America and certainly Brazil. But looking forward to seeing some of these other smaller countries get on board.
And I think related to that, let's talk a bit about the technologies which are making for some interesting things. I'd like to talk, 5G, we keep hearing about it and all the, some of the wacky stuff which has come out of the woodworks about it. But frankly, 5G, as well as distributed computing, where basically you are able to again use the power of a server to play computer games, and also streaming live service streaming games, such as what Google Stadia is doing. That actually opens up a whole new world, especially with using mobile phones, because now you're not going to have uninterrupted access. You'll be able to have internet access wherever you are on your phone or on similar mobile devices and playing PC games. So that is one very big enabling thing which will help the growth of esports and push the growth of esports to other places which may not have such good infrastructure. Other than that, another very important thing which I think is tremendously exciting is the growth of AR, augmented reality, and virtual reality. What new types of games will come out of it, especially with the combination of physical and as well as virtual worlds? What will happen, and what can we create out of that? Because frankly, at the moment for esports, the type of games, or rather the genre of games, is actually quite little. It's mostly FPS related games such as battle royales and also MOBAs, racing games perhaps, and strategy games, which as we've mentioned at the start. But I would love to see more types of genres coming up, because I think one of the issues with regards to competition, or rather why is there mostly men, is also because of a huge chunk of it, which is shooting games, at least at the start of it, like for example for Counter-Strike and Call of Duty, attract mostly male audiences. And also in terms of what people play. It has started to shift. For example, Valorant, I see that there's a surprising number of women players now, or at least, perhaps not so surprising, but it is starting to shift. And with Fortnite and all that, it's become more common. And I would love to see this sort of new types of things coming up. Plus, with the technology, we would have some very interesting iterations coming forward. Because there are things like gymnastics or like ice skating and sports, which are more performative sports. Are we able to see something similar for esports? At the moment, not really. But I think that it wouldn't be too far.
In fact, that's a great lead into our final question for tonight regarding the future of esports. I would like to hear from each of you what you hope to see, or perhaps something that doesn't really exist now that you hope to see happening one day in esports in general.
And again, just so happy to be here for World Esports Day. It's very exciting. And when we're looking towards the future, I know what Chester and British Esports Association, what they're doing in the UK is very impressive when we're talking about education. And I would love to see that in the future. We are starting to have that more here, at least in North America. We're having universities that are offering scholarships for esports, so you can go to college, play your favorite title. But having it come down to the lower levels, like in what we call our elementary or our primary schools, and starting it from a very young age. So we are getting young kids involved. And so we're going to see, I would love to see in the future more of an educational curriculum based around that. And so that we do have that, and we have these pipelines starting at a young age for gamers who want to become professionals, just like we have in traditional sport. And I certainly would like to see more of what we were talking about, active esports. So the physical, the AI, XR, VR, all of those kind of coming together for this active esports. And so we can have people play their favorite game, yet have some physical activity and be healthy and well. And so that is where I'm hoping to see the future of esports go.
Okay, yeah. So my ideal scenario is that government recognizes, Chong said, that esports is different to any other activity, and so I would like to start seeing governments having a minister or of esports in each government. And I have put this forward to our government. I'm very lucky on our board. My vice chair is Lord Vasey. He was the Minister of Culture. He was a member of Parliament, and we do laugh internally that some federations have got a prince, some have got a member of Parliament. I've got a Lord, but we would like people to be recognised. And I think if governments take esports seriously, there should be a minister of esports or a department of esports. And I think we're doing our bit, and we're doing, most of us are doing this as volunteers to help the cause, to help people, deal with a lot of things. So I think it'll be more mainstream. And I agree with Melita. Part of the curriculum, we've literally got children or under 18 studying full time esports, not just become a better gamer, but about transferable skills and how do you do a business plan? How can we create entrepreneurs with a passion for the activity they're in? And for future skills, you need future qualifications. So we've been on a journey that we're really happy, and we've got a vision plan for the next 5 years. But I think I can't stress enough how important having these global esports games and having events like World Esports Day just put it in the mind, when we can, for people about, this isn't about not doing sport. This is about doing esports and sport and other things, just, bringing esports to the party. But, and I really appreciate your time, Victoria, for hosting this panel as well, because, it's important that we keep this momentum going. So over to Chong.
Thank you. Thanks, Chester. So I would say that I'm greedy. I would like to have a bit of all of what my dear colleagues here have been talking about. I would love that we would be able to do more exploration into the science of medicine and esports, because that helps to lengthen and increase the life of esports players, which unfortunately is really short now. Are there ways to improve that? And other transitions that they can do, because esports is fundamentally about problem solving, and in team esports is about problem solving with friends. How can we help them understand that it is really, really it is just a hip and a skip away towards being successful applying these skills in life? And on the other side of it, in terms of education, I really do like where Chester has put a really organized spin to developing and growing esports in England. And I have to say again, I really thank you for you and your colleagues for creating World Esports Day. It is important to recognize people. Some people say that it is just fluff, but this is important to set the groundwork to grow, and what do you call a stone or a marker on the ground to show and also to help to develop esports further. Because at the moment, I would say, if there was one thing I'm sad about esports, is sometimes it's a bit too commercial. I mean, by all means, go and win your prizes and things of the sort, but we do need to also talk and also use esports for other purposes. Competition is not just about winning, but competition is about growing each other. Competition is about creating friendships and also about recognizing each other's strength, not just about crushing your opponent. So these are things which I would love to see as we go on in esports. Then, of course, the future of it, I really hope for, as I've mentioned a bit just now, about new forms of esports which come in, which are more inclusive in their nature, but also which are more exciting. Because at the moment, a lot of things, we are just indirectly controlling things through the mouse and keyboard. Imagine a world which is more like where we can actually control things with our thoughts, or perhaps with our first with our actions, then with our thoughts in the future. Those are things which I would love to see.
Fantastic. Well said, everyone. I think that really embodies, I think, the essence of what World Esports Day is and should be about. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's panel. Thank you guys so much for your insight. I feel like we can talk about this forever because there's just so many different layers to go through. But we that's it for time. So thank you. We have Chester King, Chong Geng, and Dr. Melita Moore here. I'm Victoria Cheng, and this panel is hosted by the Global Esports Federation. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy World Esports Day, everyone.
Happy World Esports Day.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
For those of you joining us in Singapore, I'm tremendously privileged to announce that Singapore Esports Association, together with the Global Esports Federation, are now in the position to provide for the athletes and primary officials to travel down to the games. We are really happy and excited to welcome you to our flagship event. The Secretariat will follow up and provide qualifying countries with the necessary information so that they can take advantage of this offer.